Alec Baldwin walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with a kind of swagger that only comes from a lifetime of being told yes. He didn't just enter. He arrived, chin lifted, shoulders loose, confidence dripping off him like expensive cologne. His shoes clicked against the polished floor, slow and deliberate, each step announcing that he wasn't here to be judged. He was here to be entertained. And from the very instant he took his seat at the defendant's table, his expression made one thing painfully clear. He thought this entire courtroom was beneath him. He leaned back in his chair, crossed one leg over the other, and flashed that little smirk, that thin, sideways lift of the lip that said he'd already decided how this was going to go. People whispered from the audience benches, some in disbelief, others in irritation. But Baldwin didn't hear them. Or maybe he did, and simply didn't care. He was a celebrity, a household name, someone who'd spent decades commanding film sets, news cycles, award stages, and headlines. In his world, consequences were reserved for other people, not him. Across the room, Judge Judy glanced up from her file. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She simply looked at him, one sharp, assessing stare filled with 26 years of courtroom instincts that could smell arrogance before the door even shut. Baldwin kept smirking, thinking it made him look composed. What he didn't realize was that, to Judge Judy, it looked like a confession. Not of guilt, but of entitlement. "Mr. Baldwin," she said calmly, "are you settled?" He shrugged. "As settled as I can be, Judge." That tone, that shrug, that smirk. It was the holy trinity of disrespect, and everyone watching knew it. But Judy didn't react. Not yet. She simply closed the file in front of her with quiet precision, like she was sealing a fate he didn't yet understand. Then she leaned forward, clasped her hands, and in a voice colder than polished stone, said the words that would echo across the internet within hours. "Wipe that smirk off your face. You're in MY courtroom now." The room froze. Someone in the audience gasped. Baldwin's jaw tightened. And in that brief, silent eternity between his smirk disappearing and Judy raising an eyebrow, the balance of the case shifted. What began as a routine civil dispute had just become a viral moment waiting to happen. Because Alec Baldwin, the man who'd spent decades commanding cameras, had finally met a camera he couldn't control. But before we get to the moment he lost everything in this courtroom, we need to go back. Because that smirk didn't appear out of thin air. That arrogance wasn't born in this room. And Judge Judy's rage wasn't fueled by attitude alone. There's a story behind that expression, a long, winding, increasingly destructive path that led him straight into the one courtroom where fame, charm, money, and reputation meant absolutely nothing. 3 weeks earlier, this case didn't even exist. Emma Rivers, the young woman at the center of this legal firestorm, was simply trying to survive. She worked 12-hour days as a freelance makeup artist, running from set to set, studio to studio, juggling single motherhood with unpredictable paychecks and demanding clients. She had no illusions about celebrity culture, no fantasies about fame. She'd powdered faces, covered blemishes, fixed cracked foundation, and endured more rude comments than most people hear in a lifetime. But she had never crossed paths with someone as volatile, as unpredictable, and as explosively temperamental as Alec Baldwin. And yet, 3 weeks before that courtroom explosion, she was standing on a bustling film set, holding her makeup kit, praying the day would go smoothly. Rent was due. Her son needed school supplies. Her car's brake pads were making that awful grinding sound again. She couldn't afford mistakes. She couldn't afford conflict. She couldn't afford anything going wrong. But something did. A single moment, a shove, a fall, a wrist bent at the wrong angle. A burst of pain so sharp she nearly fainted, spiraled into the lawsuit that dragged Baldwin into this courtroom. A moment that Emma didn't want, didn't expect, and tried desperately to avoid. A moment that Baldwin dismissed as nothing, but that would become the center of Judge Judy's fury. And Baldwin? He treated the entire situation like a joke. Like an annoyance he could brush away with a grin and a clever line. That smirk he wore today wasn't new. It had been plastered on his face since the moment the court notice arrived at his doorstep. He thought Emma was exaggerating. He thought Judge Judy was just another television personality. He thought the system revolved around him the way Hollywood always had. And most importantly, he thought he could win this case with attitude alone. But that courtroom, Judge Judy's courtroom, wasn't a movie set. It wasn't a red carpet interview. It wasn't a talk show. This was a place where the truth lived, whether people liked it or not. And Judy, with her decades of experience, had already read him, already sized him up, already recognized that smirk for what it truly was. A mask worn by a man who believed he was untouchable. But today, that mask was going to crack. Because in the next hour, through testimony, evidence, contradictions, and a trap Baldwin never saw coming, Judge Judy would make him regret every single second that smirk had ever sat on his face. And it all started right here, in this moment, with 5 words that wiped the color from Alec Baldwin's cheeks. You're in MY courtroom now. 3 weeks before Alec Baldwin ever stepped through the doors of Judge Judy's courtroom, Emma Rivers was standing under the harsh white lights of a downtown studio, trying to balance her makeup kit with one hand while checking her email with the other. She had been awake since 5 a.m., had packed her son's lunch, dropped him at school, and rushed across the city, praying traffic wouldn't turn this job late. Being even 10 minutes late meant you lost the paycheck. Being 30 minutes late meant you lost a client for life. That was the rule of freelance life. No safety net, no job security, no backup. Emma didn't complain. She didn't have time to. She was a single mother in a world that didn't forgive chaos, and every bill waiting on her kitchen counter reminded her what failure would cost. She was the type of person who apologized even when something wasn't her fault. The kind who worked through sickness, exhaustion, or heartbreak because she didn't have the luxury to fall apart. She needed this job. She needed every job. This one, especially, paid enough to cover her son's school fee for the month. The assistant director had told her that morning, "You'll be handling Alec Baldwin. Just be patient with him." Patience. The word meant more overtime, more emotional labor, more holding her breath to avoid stepping on celebrity egos. She nodded anyway. She always nodded. But when Alec Baldwin arrived on set nearly an hour late, Emma immediately felt the energy change. He burst through the door like a thundercloud, muttering about parking, the heat, the delays, the script, everything and everyone. His presence had weight, not the weight of authority, but the weight of unpredictability. People moved out of his way automatically, like he carried a storm that could break at any moment. Emma approached him carefully, makeup kit in hand. "Good morning, Mr. Baldwin. If you'll just take a seat, I can get started." He didn't sit. He didn't answer. He simply stared at her like she had spoken an insult instead of a greeting. She repeated softly, "I just need to finish your foundation so they can get the camera test." That's when he snapped. "I don't take orders from assistants," he barked, loud enough for half the room to hear. Emma froze. She wasn't used to confrontation. She wasn't used to being yelled at. The sudden aggression pierced through her, but she still tried to stay professional. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Just what?" he snapped again, stepping closer. He towered over her, his voice sharpened, irritated, dismissive. "Just do your job without telling me what to do." She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean..." But he didn't let her finish. With one swift motion, impulsive, careless, angry, he swatted her hand away. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It wasn't accidental. It was a shove meant to send a message. Don't speak unless spoken to. Her wrist twisted violently as her hand hit the metal edge of a lighting stand. A sharp bolt of pain shot up her arm. She fell backward, gasping, clutching her wrist. The makeup sponge rolled across the floor like a silent witness to the moment everything went wrong. A few crew members rushed toward her, but Baldwin didn't. He stood exactly where he was, glancing at her with irritated disinterest, like she had inconvenienced him by getting hurt. Then he mumbled the words that would later become the spine of Emma's lawsuit. People like, "You should be grateful. I even let you touch my face. People like you." Emma didn't cry. Not then. She bit the inside of her cheek, forcing herself to stand, forcing herself to pretend the pain wasn't making her lightheaded. Her wrist throbbed, swelling with each passing second. She excused herself and walked out of the studio, holding back tears that finally broke free only after she reached her car. The doctor's verdict was immediate and brutal. Severe wrist sprain, ligament strain, no lifting weight for several weeks. In her line of work, that wasn't an injury. It was a financial collapse. No work, no income, no stability. Her savings evaporated in days. Medical bills towered. Her landlord sent overdue notices. Her son asked why she wasn't going to work anymore, and Emma didn't know how to explain that his future depended on her wrist healing fast enough to stop them from drowning. She reached out to Baldwin's team first, hoping for compensation or at least acknowledgement. She wasn't a confrontational person. All she wanted was fairness. But she received nothing. No apology, no offer, no responsibility. Instead, a short message from someone on his PR team. "You're exaggerating. This was a minor misunderstanding. Please refrain from making defamatory statements." That was the spark that turned a bad day into a legal battle. Emma filed a simple claim, basic injury compensation. Not millions. Not some exaggerated number. Just enough to cover her bills and the income she lost because she couldn't work. But Baldwin didn't respond like a reasonable man. He responded like a celebrity who thought accountability was beneath him. He countersued her for defamation. A woman with a sprained wrist and an overdrawn bank account. He wanted her to shut up. He wanted to scare her. He wanted to punish her for daring to stand her ground. What he didn't anticipate was the one judge who did not care about fame, status, or ego. Judge Judith Scheindlin. When the case landed on her desk, she raised an eyebrow, leaned back in her chair, and said quietly to herself, "I want to hear this one." Her staff tried to warn her, "This is Alec Baldwin." She replied without hesitation, "And this is my courtroom." When Emma walked into Judy's courtroom days later, clutching her medical papers, trembling with fear, she looked like someone who had fought the same battle every single day and lost. When Baldwin walked in smirking, hands in his pockets, radiating entitlement, Judy noticed instantly. And in that split second, before a single word was spoken, Judge Judy decided exactly how she felt about this case. Emma was here for justice. Baldwin was here for ego. And the truth would expose everything. The trial was about to begin. The trial began with a silence so thick it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Emma Rivers sat at her table, hands trembling, wrist wrapped in a soft medical brace. Her posture was small, almost folded into itself, as though she was trying to take up as little space as possible. On the opposite side, Alec Baldwin lounged in his chair like he was waiting for a lunch reservation. One arm draped over the back of his chair, the other resting casually on the table, fingers tapping a slow, arrogant rhythm. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look uncertain. He looked bored. Judge Judy noticed every detail. "Ms. Rivers," she began, her voice calm but firm, "you may start." Emma took a shaky breath and began explaining the events of that day. Her voice was soft, nearly breaking with the effort of keeping control. She described the long hours, the pressure of the job, the exhaustion she carried into every shift. She explained how Alec Baldwin had entered the set angry, irritable, and dismissive. She described the shove, the pain, the fall, the weeks of unemployment that followed. But each time Emma said something damning, Baldwin reacted the same way, a scoff, a chuckle, a mockingly slow shake of his head. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't even trying. He wanted everyone to know he didn't take her seriously. Judy turned toward him. "Mr. Baldwin, do you plan to keep commenting under your breath, or would you like to wait until it's your turn to speak?" He lifted one eyebrow. "Just reacting, Judge." "React in silence," she replied sharply. "Or react outside my courtroom." The smirk flickered, but didn't disappear. Emma finished her testimony, and Judy nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Rivers. Mr. Baldwin, your turn." He stood slowly, theatrically, as though preparing to accept a standing ovation. He straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, and gave a half-smile to the audience. Then, with the confidence of a man who had talked his way out of trouble his entire life, he began. "Judge, this entire situation has been blown completely out of proportion. I did not shove her. I did not hurt her. She slipped. People slip all the time on sets. They're chaotic places. There's equipment everywhere. Someone like her," he gestured vaguely, "is bound to make mistakes." Emma flinched. Judy's eyes narrowed. "Someone like her?" He raised both hands dismissively. "I mean someone inexperienced." Emma whispered, "I've been working in this industry for 7 years." Baldwin didn't look at her. Well, maybe not very well. The room shifted uneasily. Judy leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Baldwin, continue." He did. For 10 long minutes, he tried to frame himself as the victim. He said Emma was clumsy, that she exaggerated the injury for attention, that she was trying to extract money from him because of who he was. He painted himself as calm, controlled, rational, a man simply caught in a misunderstanding. Then he made the mistake. "I never touched her," he said, crossing his arms smugly. "Not once. She fell on her own." Judy tilted her head. "You are absolutely sure of that?" 100%, he replied, tapping his chest dramatically. "On my name. On my career." Emma stared at him in disbelief. She had expected denial, excuses, maybe even a backhanded apology, but not a total rejection of reality. Judy glanced down at her notes. "Interesting. Because I have testimony from 3 crew members stating the opposite." Baldwin didn't flinch. "People say things. Doesn't mean they're true." Emma whispered, "They saw you push me." "Ms. Rivers," Judy said gently, "let me handle this." She opened a folder on her desk. "Mr. Baldwin, in your pretrial statement you said, and I quote, 'I might have brushed her hand away, but I did not shove her.'" A ripple moved through the courtroom. Baldwin's jaw tightened. "That's not I meant." "You just told me under oath that you never touched her once," Judy continued. "Yet here you admit you may have brushed her hand. That is called a contradiction." Baldwin inhaled sharply. "Fine. Maybe I brushed her hand. But she fell on her own." Judy didn't respond. She simply reached for a small black device in front of her, a recorder connected to the studio's audio feed. "Mr. Baldwin," she said carefully, "were you aware that the boom microphone above you was recording during your altercation?" His eyes widened for the first time. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, but Judy caught it. She pressed a button. The recording began to play. Baldwin's voice filled the courtroom. Angry, sharp, unmistakable. "I don't take orders from assistants." Then the sound of impact. Emma's gasp. The metallic clatter of equipment. Her cry of pain. Finally, Baldwin's final muttered insult. "People like you should be grateful I even let you touch my face." Emma's eyes filled with tears. The audience sat stunned. Baldwin's smirk evaporated like smoke. Judy paused the recording. "Do you still maintain," she asked softly, "that you did not touch her?" Baldwin opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. He looked to the ceiling, then the floor, then anywhere except the judge's eyes. Judy leaned forward. "Don't lie to me again." Alec Baldwin swallowed hard. For the first time since he entered the courtroom, he looked genuinely unsure of himself. His arrogance had cracked. His confidence had faltered. And the trap Judy set for him had just snapped shut. The trial wasn't over. But Alec Baldwin had already lost control. The silence that settled after the audio recording ended wasn't ordinary courtroom silence. It was a kind that weighed on the skin, thick and electric, as if even the air recognized the moment something irreversible had happened. Alec Baldwin's face had drained of its earlier confidence. The smirk he'd worn like armor had vanished, replaced by a tightness around the jaw, a stiffness in his shoulders, and a flicker, just a flicker, of panic. Judge Judy watched him the way a hawk watches a rabbit that finally realizes it has been cornered. "Mr. Baldwin," she said, her voice calm but infused with steel, "this is your opportunity to correct your statement. Were you truthful a moment ago when you claimed you never touched Ms. Rivers?" Baldwin swallowed. Perhaps I misremembered." Judy's eyebrows shot up. "You misremembered shoving a woman hard enough that she injured her wrist and lost 7 weeks of work? That's what you expect me to believe." He opened his mouth again, searching for words, something rehearsed, something clever, something that would let him slip past the truth with just enough wiggle room to keep his pride intact. But the courtroom wasn't a movie set, and for all his years on camera, Baldwin suddenly found himself without a script. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he finally muttered. "That wasn't my question," Judy replied. "Did you touch her?" A long pause. Then, through clenched teeth, he forced out, "Yes, I touched her, but I didn't shove her. She fell." Judy leaned forward slowly, folding her hands. "Mr. Baldwin, you touched her with enough force that she involuntarily fell backward. That is the definition of a shove. What you call it is irrelevant. What matters is what happened." Baldwin's hands balled into fists. "She exaggerated. She made it worse than." Before he could finish, Judy slammed her palm on the desk, a sharp crack that echoed through the room and made multiple people jump. "Stop." Her voice was no longer calm. It was a warning. "You do not get to interrupt me. You do not get to minimize what you did. And you certainly do not get to accuse a woman who lost her livelihood because of your temper of exaggerating. Not in my courtroom." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't make a sound. Baldwin, for the first time, shifted uncomfortably, like he could feel the ground underneath him beginning to crumble. Judy reached for another document. "Mr. Baldwin, do you recognize this?" He hesitated. "It looks like a medical report." "It is a medical report," she replied. "The hospital report from the night Ms. Rivers came in, unable to move her wrist, in severe pain, with swelling consistent with blunt force impact." Emma lowered her head. Baldwin looked away. "This," Judy continued, tapping the report, "also includes a physician's note advising a minimum of 6 weeks off work. 6 weeks. Not 6 hours. Not 6 days. 6 weeks. That is how much damage your brush caused." Baldwin huffed. "People bruise easily. Maybe she's sensitive." "Sensitive." Judy shot back. "Is that your defense? That the woman you shoved was too delicate to withstand your temper?" Baldwin stiffened. "I didn't shove her with temper." "Then what was the purpose of your action?" Judy asked bluntly. "Were you trying to guide her? Adjust her? Help her?" His jaw moved, but no words came. "Exactly," Judy said. "You acted out of anger, and anger has consequences." She reached for the next folder, a thicker one, and Baldwin immediately tensed. "This," she said, "is a compilation of witness statements. 3 separate crew members, all of whom described the same moment in nearly identical detail." Baldwin tried to speak, but Judy raised a hand. "You will listen, and you will remain quiet." She read the statements aloud, each one describing Baldwin's irritated tone, the aggressive gesture, the shove, Emma's fall, and Baldwin's dismissive comment afterward. Each word cut deeper into Baldwin's defense. Each sentence stripped away the excuses he tried to hide behind. And each moment made the courtroom feel heavier. When she finished, Judy closed the folder with deliberate finality. "Do you deny these statements?" she asked. "They're exaggerating," Baldwin whispered. "Why would they lie?" Judy asked sharply. "What do they gain from accusing their employer?" What reward is there for standing against a man who has the power to get them blacklisted in the industry? Baldwin didn't answer. Judy continued, "These people risked their careers to tell the truth. That tells me all I need to know." Baldwin's breathing grew quicker, subtle, but noticeable. His earlier arrogance had faded, replaced by defensiveness and disbelief. He wasn't used to being challenged. He wasn't used to being cornered. And he certainly wasn't used to being stripped of the entitlement he'd always worn like a second skin. But Judy wasn't done. She held up one final document, a printed email. "This," she said, turning it toward him, "is from your PR representative, sent to Ms. Rivers after she attempted to request compensation for her injury. In this email, your team accuses her of defamation, exaggeration, and dramatic storytelling. Your team threatens legal action if she continues to discuss the incident." Emma stared at the floor as Judy read the last line aloud. "Please refrain from making defamatory statements which could harm Mr. Baldwin's brand image." When Judy finished, she set the paper down gently. "Mr. Baldwin," she said quietly, "this isn't about your brand. This is about your behavior." He opened his mouth to defend himself, but Judy didn't allow it. "You injured a woman doing her job. You lied under oath. You attempted to intimidate her afterward. And you walked into my courtroom with a smirk on your face, as if this entire process was beneath you." Her voice grew even colder. "I don't tolerate arrogance. I don't tolerate dishonesty. And I certainly don't tolerate celebrities thinking they can weaponize power against people who can't fight back." Baldwin's shoulders slumped. The courtroom was silent. Only Judy's voice filled the air, steady, controlled, devastating. "You came in here, believing your fame would shield you. But the truth speaks louder than your reputation. And the evidence speaks louder than your excuses." Emma looked up then, her eyes red, but her gaze steady. And for the first time since the trial began, Baldwin looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how deeply he had damaged someone who was simply trying to survive. And he realized something else too. Judge Judy hadn't even delivered the verdict yet. The worst was still coming. When Judge Judy finally leaned back in her chair, the atmosphere in the courtroom felt suffocating. The audience stared at Alec Baldwin with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something close to disappointment. This wasn't the Hollywood rebel they expected, the quick-witted actor with a sharp tongue and confident swagger. This was someone stripped bare, someone exposed, someone who had built an entire wall of arrogance, only to watch it crumble brick by brick under the weight of truth. Judy folded her hands. "Mr. Baldwin," she began, her tone colder now, "you came into this courtroom believing you would walk out untouched. You believed your name carried enough weight to tip the scale. You believed Ms. Rivers would be too afraid, too intimidated, too insignificant to challenge you." She paused, letting the silence pull tight. "You believed wrong." Baldwin stared at the floor. The confidence was gone, vanished like smoke. His shoulders, once squared in defiance, now drooped under the pressure of accountability. The courtroom felt like a spotlight, and he stood at the center of it with nowhere to hide. "Ms. Rivers," Judy continued, "please stand." Emma rose to her feet, hands trembling, eyes shining with the kind of vulnerability that only comes after weeks of fear, financial strain, and humiliation. Yet there was a quiet strength in her posture now, the strength of someone who finally sensed justice within reach. "Emma," Judy said gently, "you stepped into this courtroom today as a woman who was pushed, dismissed, injured, and silenced. You were made to feel powerless. But you came here anyway. You stood up for the truth. And this court believes you." Emma's breath hitched. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't look away. Judy turned her gaze back to Baldwin. "Mr. Baldwin, you shoved her. You lied about it. You tried to intimidate her afterward. You let your PR team attack her integrity. You attempted to weaponize your fame to bury her voice. And then you entered my courtroom wearing a smirk that told me everything I needed to know about your character." Baldwin winced, but said nothing. Judy picked up the judgment paperwork. "Here's my verdict." The entire room tensed. "Ms. Rivers, I am awarding you $12,000 for medical expenses, $35,000 for lost wages, $8,000 for emotional distress, and an additional $5,000 penalty for Mr. Baldwin's deliberate misconduct." She lifted her eyes. A total of $60,000. A gasp moved through the courtroom. Baldwin's head snapped up. 60,000? That's absurd. Judy cut him off instantly. Silence. The word cracked like thunder. "You do not negotiate with me. You do not challenge my judgment. And you certainly do not raise your voice after lying under oath." Baldwin closed his mouth. The twitch near his jaw betrayed his fury, but even he knew better than to speak again. Judy wasn't finished. "In addition to the financial judgment," she continued, "I am issuing the following directive. This court will forward the details of your contradictory testimony and the audio evidence to the district attorney's office for possible perjury review." Baldwin's eyes widened. "Are you serious? Perjury? Over this?" Judy's stare hardened. "Over your behavior, over your arrogance, over your belief that you are untouchable. No one," she said, leaning forward, "and I mean no one, is above the truth." The words hung in the air like a final blow. Emma collapsed back into her seat, relief flooding her entire body. For the first time since the injury, she felt the weight lift, slowly but undeniably. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't at the mercy of a man who believed status exempted him from consequences. She had won. She had done the impossible. Meanwhile, Baldwin sat frozen, struggling to process the reality he could no longer escape. He had faced many critics in his life, many scandals, many controversies, but never had he been dismantled with such surgical precision. Never had someone held him accountable with such unrelenting clarity. Judge Judy hadn't just ruled against him. She had peeled back every layer of ego he had built over decades and exposed the raw truth beneath it. And that truth was this. His smirk had cost him far more than money. It cost him dignity. It cost him reputation. It cost him the illusion that he could walk anywhere, say anything, do anything, and remain untouched. As he left the courtroom, reporters swarmed outside like vultures sensing weakness. Flashes went off. Microphones shoved forward. Questions fired like bullets. "Mr. Baldwin, do you have a comment? Did Judge Judy's ruling surprise you? Do you regret appearing in her courtroom today? Is the $60,000 judgment fair?" He pushed through them, silent, jaw clenched, shoulders tight. There was no smirk now, only embarrassment, frustration, and a humiliation, so raw it showed in his walk. But outside the walls of that courthouse, something else was happening. The audio clip Judy played? The moment Baldwin's smirk vanished? The line, "Wipe that smirk off your face. You're in MY courtroom now." It all went viral. Clips spread across social media. Millions of views in hours. Memes exploded. Comments flooded in by the thousands. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag smirkwipe. Hashtag Judy destroyed Baldwin. Hashtag justice for Emma. Reaction channels dissected every second. Talk shows replayed the verdict. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Judge Judy brings Baldwin to his knees. Arrogance meets consequence." And Emma? She became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of courage. Support poured in. Makeup brands reached out offering work. Influencers shared her story. Donations covered her bills. Parents, workers, freelancers, and especially single mothers saw her and felt something powerful. Hope. That even against someone with fame, power, and influence, truth could still win. As for Baldwin, the internet crowned him with a new title, one he would never escape. The man who smirked in Judge Judy's court. A reminder that arrogance has a price. A reminder that power can crumble. A reminder that justice may be slow, but it never forgets. And in the end, Judge Judy's final words became the moral etched into the public memory. You can hide behind fame. You can hide behind money. But you cannot hide behind lies. Justice wasn't kind that day. Justice wasn't gentle. Justice wasn't impressed by a smirk. Justice simply did what it always does. Arrive unavoidable and unbothered when truth demands it.